Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. By now, you are learning, as I did this morning as I awoke, that Pope Francis, the Catholic Church's first Latin American pontiff, who worked in his tenure to bring the Catholic Church to a place not comfortable to a lot of Catholics, atonement, forgiveness, for itself, for its own misgivings, a progressive strain throughout his tenure. Pope Francis passing away at the age of 88. And joining me to discuss this is the Executive Director of Dignity USA, Marion Duddy Burke. Dignity USA, an organization that works to bring the Catholic Church even further along in its acceptance of its LGBTQ plus member base. Marion, thanks for joining me this morning. I appreciate you doing that. First, your thoughts on the passing of Pope Francis and his term while serving as Pope.
Well, thank you for having me on this very sad and shocking day for, I think, many, many people all across the world. I don't think we can talk about Pope Francis in words other than transformative and unique at this point. I certainly, from the perspective of LGBTQ plus people, Pope Francis was like no one else. You know, he has made us much more visible within the church. He is clearly comfortable meeting with, embracing, serving LGBTQ people. He, did the radical act of calling us by the names we use for ourselves and sitting and meeting with many LGBTQ people, including myself, representing, a banned organization by the Vatican, and holding hands and laughing and listening and urging us on, saying our work was important. He truly was someone who cared about the people of the church, the people of the world, especially those who felt excluded or oppressed. He really is a singular figure all across the world.
I come from a perspective. I'm not a Catholic. In fact, I'm agnostic. I'm an atheist. I don't have a dog in this hunt. But I found myself often warmed by the overtures that Pope Francis made to, as you mentioned, the excluded, to the refugee. He to me exemplified a tone of Christianity that I long ago gave up on ever hearing from an organized religious standpoint. Because, we on the left, we complain all the time that, I'd like to see, the religious right act more like Jesus in their ideology. And I feel as if Pope Francis really reminded a lot of folks, left, right, center, otherwise, where Christianity was supposed to be by doctrine, and it really rankled a lot of. I mean, I'm going through Twitter X platform today, and the responses are just gut wrenching. But I guess should be unsurprising at this point. Can you speak to the progress that the Pope made with the church? Of course, there was more to be done, but also the tone with which he tried to do it, from a tone of kindness to bring the Catholic Church away from that finger wagging to a place of understanding that we're all humans, we all have our differences, and that the church should be more welcoming of those differences instead of exclusionary.
I think you captured that, what it was that attracted so many people to Pope Francis. I've heard him called the modern day Jesus. He walked through the world with that same kind of openness and humility and responsiveness to human needs that we hear about in the gospel. And as you said, that had been very surprising in a time when organized religion was mostly identified with the thou shalt nots kind of thing, and very extremely and harshly. His work with refugees, with the very poor, with the very sick, with holding, tender, sick children, was remarkable and very moving on just a human scale. I think, we saw the end of oppressing theologians for raising ideas that were controversial. When Pope Francis began the whole synod process, this global meeting of the church, this listening process to bring the voices of people of the church and people from outside the Catholic Church into conversation around what our church should be, the first document admitted that the church was a place of imperfection and that it had marginalized people, and we really needed to hear the voices of those who had been wounded. And I think that kind of admission of failure in such a public document was very unexpected from our church, and it touched a lot of people and made space for many voices. As you said, of course, it was an imperfect process. He was an imperfect man. There is still much to be done. But there really was a seismic shift in how our church moved through the world and what it emphasized, kindness, compassion, inclusion, all of those things that really gave people a little bit of hope at a time it was desperately needed.
Our guest this morning, Marianne Duddy Burke, the Executive Director at Dignity USA, based in Boston. Thanks for getting up this morning and doing this. I'm sure you probably had some folks in your inbox waiting to hear from anybody, especially for a show like this from a left of center point of view. I also want to talk a little bit about how Pope Francis made the Catholic Church see itself and its history. The thing that I think made me a fan of the Pope, honestly, was that he embodied what I would love to see in American leadership, and understanding that our history is complex. We have a lot of wrongs in our past that we've really hardly addressed, let alone acknowledged. And he started to do the hard work on that sort of atonement, trying to right wrongs as much as is possible. And again, with a lot of flack from folks even within the church and conservatives, across the globe. Not seeing that strain right now in American politics. His passing to me is just an equally sad moment. But can you speak to the fact that he was doing some of what, like I said, I'd like to see in American politics, an acceptance of a fraught past and misgivings and misdeeds and atonement for it?
Again, I think that's a very perceptive stance and a very perceptive comment about what is needed. And I think that the Pope felt that in the absence of moral leadership coming from within the United States, from officials within the United States, both civil and religious, that the Vatican had a role to play, and that he as Pope had a role to play. His chastisement of the Trump administration on its immigration policy, for example, was one of the strongest statements that came from anywhere in the world, and I think was very necessary. And I believe he hoped that it would lead groups like the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to take a stronger leadership role, in a place that, other than its own concerns about refugee resettlement programs and things like that are funded by the conference, there really has been a deafening silence there. Catholics in the Senate, Catholic politicians have been largely failing to take a morally convicted stance against some of the evils that are being rolled out in the name of our country at this point, and the way that vulnerable people, both within our borders and across the world, are suffering and even dying or in risk of dying because of things like, the end of HIV drugs being supplied and nutrition programs being made available to children and people in war-torn areas and places where that's their only source of nutrition. I mean, yes, we need to be aware of this. We need to own that this is being done in our names, and we need those moral voices who have the authority to be heard around the world to challenge that kind of evil. So this is a void that I hope can be filled correctly and soon.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Something else that you had said reminded me as well that Pope Francis was one of the few religious voices speaking with an ounce of clarity when it comes to even climate change. I think about climate change when I think about refugees and immigration, because that is a driving factor in folks leaving where they are to go somewhere else. He was a leading voice from any religious movement when it came to climate change.
Yes, he really put the existential crisis that we are all facing as human beings living on Earth in the center of his papacy. He understood that this was a threat to individuals, to nations, to cultures, and to our entire existence as a people. And putting the force of the Vatican behind the need to address global change was very significant. This is something that impacts every human being on Earth in one way or another. And it was right that he, as the leader of the largest Christian denomination on Earth, raised this to the level of a moral crisis. I mean, our entire scriptures starts with the creation of the earth and the need for humanity to steward it well. And he spoke from the depth of the very genesis of our scriptural tradition.
You spoke of what's to come next. From your point of view, what do you think does come next? Has he succeeded in your mind, or is this just a gut instinct question? Do you think he has succeeded in reforming the church enough that whoever succeeds him will carry on his legacy, or this is the cynicism in me, the skeptic in me? Are we about to see a turning back of the clock, so to speak? I worry about there being a MAGA pontiff in waiting. That's just the cynic in me these days.
The question of what happens in conclave is so complicated, but when you just look at the numbers, Pope Francis has appointed over 3/4 of the folks who are called the cardinal electors, the folks who will gather in that secret sealed chamber and cast vote after vote until a majority is reached, until a new pope is elected. I think that bodes well in some senses. I think that there is a lot of concern on the ground for the kind of nationalism that is endemic to many parts of the world at this point. I mean, I certainly heard that. I've been on the ground in Rome during the 2 assembly meetings that have happened over the last 2 years and had a chance to talk with people who were gathered there and with Vatican officials. And I did hear, there is a real question about the role that the Vatican can play in a time of repression in many places around the world, and how do we stand for the human rights and human dignity of all of God's people, whether Catholic or not. So I am hopeful that will be central to the thinking of those gathered in the world. I certainly pray that the Holy Spirit will infuse that kind of wisdom and hope in those folks. But I also would hope that, in the best of all possible worlds, I would love the church to kind of put the conclave on pause, enter into a period of prayerful discernment and in conversation again with the people of the church, asking what we want as leaders, as the next leader of the Vatican to be. If nothing else, I would hope that the cardinal electors would look at some of these documents that were generated from all around the world through these listening sessions that were held in conjunction with the synod and hear the calls that arose through those hundreds of thousands of listening sessions where people poured out their hopes, their concerns, their joys, what they felt the church gave them in their lives, and use that to guide their deliberations.
Marion Duddy Burke, Executive Director at Dignity USA, thank you for joining us to have a conversation on the passing of Pope Francis, passing away yesterday at the age of 88. Thank you for joining the Ron Show today.
Thank you, and my condolences to all who are grieving at the moment.
You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL. Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, Substack. Speaking of the Twitter X platform, I stay on it because I like to stay dialed in on all perspectives of conversation. But man, the responses, the mixed responses to the passing of Pope Francis. I would suggest that if you want to have a pure of heart, pure of mind kind of day, don't dive into the Pope Francis conversation on the Twitter X platform. It's something else. Irish President Michael Higgins offering his condolences. He says Francis' recognition of the essential dignity of every human being helped him confront issues such as climate change and the plight of migrants, as well as the child sexual abuse scandal that rocked the church. This is from the Associated Press. Higgins, who has been Ireland's president since 2011, said he discussed these issues with Francis during 5 meetings over the course of his papacy. Let's see some other world leaders that have, even the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, offering condolences for Francis and praised his humanitarian stance, including support for innocent Palestinian women and children in the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. From Turkey, President Erdogan said Francis was dedicated to building interfaith dialogue and addressing human tragedies such as the Palestinian issue and the war in Gaza. The Dalai Lama saying that Francis lived a simple but meaningful life, offering prayers and condolences for Francis for his spiritual brothers, sisters, and followers around the world. He said in a letter that Francis had dedicated himself to the service of others, quote, constantly revealing by his own actions how to live a simple but meaningful life. The best tribute we can pay to him is to be a warm-hearted person, serving others wherever and in whatever way we can. President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, rest in peace, Pope Francis. May God bless him and all who loved him. A radically different tone than the Easter Truth Social post that President Trump offered the nation and the world yesterday. Throughout the day, there'll be more statements. I wanted to go to, it was about a year ago, as a matter of fact, when Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock from Atlanta got to meet with the Pope, and WANF-TV had a nice little 2-minute or so piece on that. Let me share that audio with you.
One of Georgia's most popular pastors, U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock, now sharing what he discussed with the man leading the largest Christian church on earth, Pope Francis. Their meeting held in private with the help of an interpreter this past April at the Vatican. Warnock says they spoke and prayed about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the Pope telling the senator he's in regular contact with a small congregation of Catholics there.
He calls them almost daily, just to check on them. And as a pastor with a parish, I was just very impressed with that kind of pastoral commitment, that kind of heart.
We're not just about what happens in these walls, we're about what's happening in the world.
Warnock has led Ebenezer Baptist Church since 2005, Dr. Martin Luther King's former pastoral home. The senator says he and the Pope spoke about their shared faith and helping the needy.
That's what guides my work every single day in the Senate. And I was deeply honored to meet not only the leader of the Catholic Church, but a fellow traveler.
Padre.
Often revered and criticized as one of the most progressive popes in history, he's expressed support to address climate change, immigration, and the LGBTQ community.
Right.
What's your thoughts on his positions on those things?
The Pope, I believe, labors to center human dignity. And that doesn't mean we always land on the same side of every issue. But what I see in him is an effort to center human dignity.
Two men sharing a passion for their shared beliefs.
Don't just hold the book and wave the book.
A reverend from Georgia and the leader of a church with a 2,000-year history.
So, second half of the show is going to take a decidedly different pivot, a pivot altogether. The passing of Pope Francis catching us all I guess somewhat by surprise. The passing of an 88-year-old man who had been battling pneumonia for most of the last 2 months, I guess, shouldn't come as that much of a surprise. I guess it was just the meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance just the day before had, I guess, many of us believing that perhaps the Pope was out of the woods on that battle. It turned out not to be the case. Pope Francis passing at the age of 88. All right, so second half of the show, the president's Easter message. Joe Rogan. When you've lost Joe Rogan, we'll discuss that a little bit. We do have a gubernatorial candidate, one that I'm very excited about, having rolled out his announcement to run for the state's highest office. We'll discuss that as well. A couple other things. There was judicial action on the student visa case. We talked with Dustin Baxter from Cook and Baxter last week. They had a successful Friday afternoon. We'll dive into that. Oh, my God. Have you seen this? Nancy Mace in the makeup aisle, the skincare aisle, having a shouting match with someone I guess she just assumed was gay. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but oh, how nasty. We go from Pope Francis to Nancy Mace when the Ron Show returns.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Political pundits love to talk horse races, right? And while there is the appearance of conversations being had between Senator John Thune, Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party, and Governor Brian Kemp about a potential 2026 run, there's also a movement here in the state of Georgia on who will replace Brian Kemp in the governor's office. Well, a candidate who I'm very high on. He's been on the show a couple times. I've invited him back if he'd like to elaborate on his campaign. Would love to have that conversation with him. I have reached out via text and email, and hopefully we'll have him on soon. He made his announcement, and I'm going to give you the full 3 minutes, 10 seconds of his campaign biographical rollout video.
I'm Jason Esteves. I've had enough of families working harder than ever, but still struggling, and our kids falling behind instead of getting ahead. Yet extreme politicians in Georgia push Trump's reckless agenda, rig the system for special interests, and stick us with the bill. The reason I love basketball so much, if you hustle, stand strong, and work together, you can overcome the odds and win. And Georgia, it's time to fight back. I know we can, because I know what it's like to be an underdog. I grew up on the south side of Columbus in a working class neighborhood. My dad was in the Army, my mom raised us. They often worked 2 to 3 jobs each just to make ends meet. Neither one of my parents went to college, but they taught me the importance of hard work, community, and giving back, even when you don't have much. I worked my way through college and law school with the help of scholarships, student loans, and prayers. In between, I taught social studies at a public middle school, 150 students that had for too long been left behind and counted out, simply because of where they lived. They were just looking for a fair shot. So I ran for school board in Atlanta at a time when parents and students had lost faith in our public schools. I listened, learned, and led as board chair, helping Atlanta schools attain its highest graduation rate ever, securing more money to increase teacher pay and provide our students with more of the tools that they need to succeed. I also worked as a senior leader at a company and eventually became partner at a law firm. And then, seeing how extremely political our state capital has become, I became a state senator to change it and focus on what really matters: healthcare, housing, education, and supporting our small businesses. But the best job I've ever had is dad. Ariel and I are blessed with Jaden and Zoe, the light of our lives. Next to raising a family, starting a small business is the most challenging thing Ariel and I have ever done together, and we've done it twice. First, an urgent and primary care clinic where it was needed most, and then a couple restaurants, helping create jobs and a greater sense of community. I've seen Georgia's potential because I've lived it, but I've also seen what happens when politicians spend all of their time playing politics and cozying up to special interests. We pay the price. I'm Jason Esteves, and I'm running for governor because we can do better. It starts with tackling the high cost of living to give our kids a better life than what we had, improving access to healthcare and protecting women's reproductive freedom, lowering housing costs, investing in schools all across our state, and making it easier to start a business and grow it. I want Georgia to be known as the #1 place to work, start a business, and raise a family no matter who you are or where you live.
Come on, Dad.
Together, I know we can do it.
That is Senator Jason Esteves from the Democratic Party announcing his run for governor here in the state of Georgia. If you listen to this show, you know I'm very excited about his prospects. I'm very fond of him as the candidate, the kind of candidate that at the local, state, and at the federal level, the Democratic Party needs to see more of. Now, that was a highly biographical, kind of a flyover touching on issues. Over time, as the race starts to really formulate, we'll get more into the nuts and bolts about his vision for the state. Again, that invitation is out. I'm sure we'll hear back from his camp shortly about some time to have him on now that the General Assembly is out of session. But again, you heard the man. He is a husband, a father. He and his wife run 2 businesses. They have, kids to shuttle around. We're getting close to the summertime, and so there'll be, ball practice and summer camps and vacation plans, hopefully, and all that good stuff. So he's a busy man. I fully understand that. We'll get, I'm hoping, 15, 20 minutes to have a conversation with him about his vision for the state of Georgia and how he sees this campaign shaping up. We talked a good bit last week, over the last couple of weeks actually, about the plight of foreign students here in the United States attending colleges and universities suddenly finding out that their student visas had been revoked. We had Dustin Baxter on from the Cook and Baxter Law Firm here in Atlanta, who had taken on, as of our conversation last Wednesday, was it? More than 125, I think it was 133 or 131, something like that, cases of students, foreign students, who were suddenly made aware that their student visas had been revoked. I'm sure that number has grown since then, the number of cases that they're handling. He guesstimated they're in the thousands across the country, more than 130 on his case, on his docket here in the state of Georgia. This from Ross Williams, Georgia Recorder, reporting Friday evening. U.S. District Court Judge Victoria Calvert issued a temporary restraining order Friday that will allow 133, there's the number, international students and recent graduates studying around the country, including 26 in Georgia, to continue their coursework in the United States for at least the next 2 weeks. The administration of President Donald Trump revoked the students' access to a program that allows international students to maintain their visa status. The students say they were given no forewarning and were not told why their status was being revoked. Some said they were ordered by the government to leave the country voluntarily or face mandatory deportation. The judge, Calvert, found that the students are likely to show that the termination of their status was not lawful and was an, quote, arbitrary and capricious use of power. The judge also disagreed with the government's argument that the students had suffered no harm from the decision and should reapply to the program or consider transferring credits to universities in their home countries. Judge Calvert writing, plaintiffs fear that they will abruptly have to leave behind family, cancel marriage plans, and abandon their communities in order to avoid detention or being labeled a national security or foreign policy threat. Many plaintiffs are mere weeks away from attaining their degrees. The loss of timely academic progress alone is sufficient to establish irreparable harm. Additionally, all plaintiffs report high levels of stress and anxiety resulting from the uncertainty around their futures. If plaintiffs cannot work or study, they cannot remain in the United States legally and will therefore be subjected to removal proceedings or forced to return to their native countries on their own. Williams reporting, the order also compels the government to agree to a protective order promising not to disclose the identity of the students participating in the case and not to use their identity for any purpose other than the litigation. The court has scheduled another hearing this coming Thursday to consider granting more permanent relief. Good job from Dustin Baxter and the folks at Cook and Baxter Law Firm for getting that temporary restraining order put in place. Well, speaking of deportations and immigration, Joe Rogan, in his infinite wisdom, opines on what he calls an overcorrection, the Trump administration and Tom Homan and ICE becoming monsters. Listen to this conversation he had on his latest podcast episode.
If you wanted to like destroy society and make it worse, what would you do? You bring people in from a third world country, don't have them change anything, financially incentivize them to be there, give them free money while you're not helping the poor people in America. They were giving them debit cards, free housing, free food, putting them up in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. Why, you old shit?
I mean, the reason they were in New York to be in that hotel in the first place is because a couple of Republican governors sent them there, unannounced, by the way.
If you wanted to destroy society, that's how you would do it. That's how you would do it.
I mean, that sounds...
You would just keep
like it's
doing
working.
Like it's going in that direction.
Yeah.
So,
this is where not knowing your American history comes in, because this country has been building itself on the backs of immigrant labor, third world immigrant labor in often cases, for centuries now. People like Joe Rogan enjoy a well-built, affordable table. They just don't want the people that built the table to have a seat at that table. Okay, but hang on. I'm getting to the part where he actually sort of criticizes Trump and Tom Holman and all the ICE deportation nonsense.
the problem with things that are going in a radical direction, and then there's an overcorrection. So the overcorrection is lack of due process. The overcorrection is like round them all up, ship them to jail. Like that's like some things that you say when you're not thinking things through. Like, what do you do about all the criminals? Take them all, fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
You know that caricaturized voice he's making? That is mega bubba. That's what he's doing. He's making fun of his own audience base and the MAGA voter in general. Brilliant.
What about due process? No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. What if you are an enemy of, let's not say any current president. Let's pretend we got a new president,
AOC.
totally new guy.
Or woman.
In 2028. And this is a common practice now of just rounding up gang members with no due process and shipping them to El Salvador.
Yes, I mean, couldn't the Proud Boys be construed as a gang?
You're a gang member. No, I'm not. Prove it. What? I got to go to court. No, no due process.
That's what's happening.
That's dangerous, Joe.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. We got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters. But then again, you got to find these motherfuckers that are here that have terrorist cells and that are ready to fucking blow up malls in Dallas and do crazy shit.
You mean like white nationalist Timothy McVeigh, domestic terrorism, Oklahoma City, perhaps?
This is the best argument for intelligence agencies, is that there's real threats. You know, like for someone to say, fuck all the CIA, fuck the FBI. What, are you crazy? Who's going to investigate real threats? Like the real world exists. As much as you want to pretend that that we can all go kumbaya tomorrow if we all just lay down our arms. No, there's people that are 48 years old and dedicated to crime.
Oh, I know a 78-year-old who's dedicated to it.
They've been dedicated to crime in Guatemala, and now they're here. You know, and now they're selling fentanyl, and they're not going to stop. Okay?
They don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And by the way, 9 out of 10, according to a study, Guatemalans leave their country because of economic uncertainties or lack of opportunities there, something that the Biden-Harris administration was working on in what they call the Golden Triangle of Central America. And by the way, was seeing effectiveness with a dip in migration from that particular region of Central America. But, whatever. Let's just do something short-term instead, knowing that eventually the problem will rear its head again.
And they're on EBT cards where you're getting money from the government for free every month because you're in a sanctuary city.
That they were sent to by 2 Republican governors from Florida and Texas. You're leaving that part out, dude.
Yeah. And you get free food and you're a criminal.
Never mind the fact that Joe Rogan says a lot of really dumb shit. I'm going to edit myself. About immigration and the free stuff and whatnot. First of all, they wouldn't be at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York if some jackasses in Florida and Texas hadn't sent them there. The Joe Rogan mindset is just sort of baffling. There's no concept of the fact that the reason we live the mostly comfortable lifestyle we do in the United States, I mean, every household in this country has a refrigerator, right? I mean, if you don't have a refrigerator, that's kind of considered third world, because in a lot of third world countries, having a refrigerator is a luxury. The cost of goods and services in this country are as attainable and as affordable as they are, in large part due to immigrant labor in various facets. And labor, by the way, in countries that his president is throwing tariffs on. Cheap labor, often hired by American-owned companies. There's no connecting of the dots here. See, this is what happens when a guy whose flock thinks he's a deep thinker actually endorses a candidate simply because that candidate came on his podcast. He's not a smart man. Joe Rogan is not a smart guy. And he puts that on full display with each episode. He's just developed this platform to do exactly as Donald Trump did, affirm the idiocy of an audience craving the affirmation of their idiocy in this fact-based world, this cruel fact-based, liberally biased world that keeps telling them that they're wrong. They are. He is. Trump usually too. They all just prop each other up. But how about that? Even Joe Rogan and all that wrongness it is about the free stuff and the monsters, and never mind the fact that Trump in his first presidency actually let more criminal immigrants in. The Cato Institute, the libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute came up with this data, that Donald Trump in his first presidency let more criminal immigrants in during his first 4 years than Joe Biden did during all of his 4 years. And before you go saying I make this stuff up, well, first of all, I'm going to include it in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. October 31st, 2024. Trump released more migrants with criminal records than Biden, according to a Cato Institute report. That was covered in Newsweek. Trigger words to MAGA, though. Data, research, study. This is The Ron Show. All right, final 9 minutes or so of The Ron Show, and I'm going to go ahead and warn you, I should have done this with Joe Rogan and his potty mouth. Nancy Mace's potty mouth soon to come as well. First things first, though, we got to talk about Pete Hegseth.
Breaking news now in the Pentagon tonight. With a new report, the defense secretary shared military information about a U.S. strike in a private Signal group chat with family members and his lawyer, among others. Yamiche Alcindor is following this story for us. Yamiche, good evening.
By the way, this is from NBC News. Let's give them credit here.
That's right, Hallie. According to the New York Times, the defense secretary shared detailed military information about that strike, which happened back in March in a separate private Signal chat that included his wife and about a dozen other people, including some Pentagon employees. The Times says he allegedly shared in this new chat similar information that he shared in the first Signal chat when the editor of The Atlantic was added by mistake. According to the Times, the information shared in this new chat includes flight schedules that were similar to the first chat that came to light. An administration official told the Times there was no national security breach and no new classified information was shared in this new chat. So NBC News, though, has not confirmed the existence of this new Signal chat.
And before we go with the Trump derangement syndrome, this is just a liberal left. Okay. John Ulyot. I think I'm saying his name right. This is from Politico. Former chief Pentagon spokesman, and he led communications at the National Security Council and Department of Veterans Affairs in President Donald Trump's first term. Resigned from the Pentagon last week, was a senior communication advisor on Trump's 2016 campaign. Opines, it's been a month of total chaos at the Pentagon. From leaks of sensitive operational plans to mass firings, the dysfunction is now a major distraction for the president, who deserves better from his senior leadership. President Donald Trump has a strong record, this guy writes, of holding his top officials to account. Given that, it's hard to see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth remaining in his role for much longer. Okay, so here we are on the heels of the debacle that was the Marjorie Taylor Greene town hall. I have, by the way, reached out to Aaron Nelms, one of the three who was arrested, one of the two tased, by the way, simply for booing. Looking forward to having him on the show in the very near future so I can get an eyewitness account of what went down and why he could possibly surmise Ackworth PD decided being tased was necessary. In the meanwhile, speaking of foul-mouthed miscreants serving in the House of Representatives, MAGA Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace in the makeup aisle basically labels this guy a lunatic in Daisy Dukes. I have to tell Nancy this, and anyone else who thinks that shorts with a 5 or 6, maybe 5-inch inseam, we'll say 5-inch inseam, they're not Daisy Dukes, Nancy. That's called fashion. Men are now wearing shorts that show off a little bit of the thigh. That's trend. That's not, it's not provocative. It's not Daisy Dukes. Daisy Dukes are cut-off jean shorts, and this man is wearing not cut-off jean shorts. He's just wearing fashionable-sized shorts. Anyway, this exchange I guess this was like a skincare aisle. She likes to term it a makeup. It's a skincare aisle. Men use skin and should have a skincare regimen too, by the way. Just saying. Mine is to avoid the sun as much as possible without sunscreen. So anyway, this was the exchange she had when this constituent asked if she's going to have, just asked, Are you going to have any more town halls? I'd love to have another town hall.
I do them every year.
Every year.
You want to keep going?
Do any more this
do you want to keep harassing me? You could have gone to a dozen town halls last year.
I asked if you're doing any more this year. It was one simple question.
Yeah.
Right. Are you doing a town
I've already done one. I'll do plenty more.
Any more this year? It was a simple question.
You're always invited.
Okay, sweet. Well,
and by the way, I voted for gay marriage twice.
What does that have to do with
me?
me?
I'm just saying, it has to everything to do with you.
Do you think everything about me has to do with gay marriage?
I do.
That's
absolutely.
your first stance when you speak with me?
Absolutely.
There's no other humane
if you want to get in my face about town halls, you should have shown up to one last year.
There's no other humane thing you can talk about me just saying, oh, I support gay marriage.
Yeah,
that's
because you're getting in my face about a town hall. You could have gone last year.
Question from right
Would you like me?
If you have any plans to have more town halls this year?
I mean, is this where I point out that, by the way, gay marriage is not the only one singular issue that gay people have, or that, how about asking if he's gay in the first, or why presume? That's sort of bigoted, Nancy. I mean, that's like presuming that black people only care about black issues, or Jewish people only care about Israel and Jewish issues and anti-Semitism. Like, you know, we're complex minds. We get to have positions on government efficiency, U.S. aid, and border issues and educational issues. We get to have questions about things other than just, can we marry one another? I mean, thanks for that.
I have town halls every year. I have over a dozen every year.
Great. That was my entire question. You didn't have to go into the spiel about
You could have come to any of them last year.
Okay. And
I had over a dozen.
Year, not 2024.
Where were you the year before that? Okay. Or the year before that?
It was a simple question.
Oh, because you know what? Because you people on the left are crazy.
So
you're absolutely fucking crazy.
I'm absolutely fucking crazy.
You are. And get out of my face.
You're insane.
Goodbye.
You're insane.
Fuck you.
You're gonna fuck me, and you're gonna be voted out so fast this year.
I'm not. I won by so much.
You're a disgrace to this state. That's what you are. You're a disgrace. I asked you a simple question, and you just to go on this tirade and tell me fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you.
Disgusting.
Get out of my face.
Fuck you.
Get out of my face. Try it again. What's your name?
Nasty bitch.
What's your name?
You're a nasty bitch. That's
What's your name?
You say fuck me?
Yep, I sure did.
The first thing you're gonna say to me is
absolutely.
Me for asking you a question?
Get the fuck out of my face.
Fuck you.
Now.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
That is a Republican congresswoman in a department store. As a man, by the way, who was like 6 feet or further away from her, not in her face, and by the way, towards the end is walking away from her because he's had enough. He's disgusted. You heard him say that. And she's telling him, as he's walking away, to get out of her face. Whether you have or haven't seen this video before, I've done nothing to doctor, except for getting out all the F-bombs, I've done nothing to doctor the back and forth. That is literally how even she shared this video, how it all went down. There were no hostilities. There's no tussled hair or shirt. There was no scrapping, nothing like that. He's 5-6 feet from her, asked her a question, and she goes full on Lulu unhinged and shares this video on social media thinking that it somehow makes her look better. To whom? I'm just asking, in what way does that video make Nancy Mace look better? Or even, here's another one, how does this make him look like the lunatic, the lefty lunatic that she claims he is? I'm sorry. The only person that comes out, and I get it, I understand, I'm left of center, and I don't like Nancy Mace. But objectively speaking, ask anyone who doesn't have a horse in this race, who came off looking unhinged? And by the way, harping on his shorts in the statement here, wearing Daisy Duke shorts. No, he's wearing 5-inch inseam shorts. I hate to tell you this, Nancy. Those aren't Daisy Dukes. They're not jean cutoff shorts. They're just shorts with, I would guess, a 5-inch inseam. That is fashionable today. Men with nice legs get to wear those. Maybe ladies without nice legs are a touch jealous. I don't know. Representative Mike Collins, congressman from Georgia, comments on the video that she shared. He got his own 1v1 town hall. Watch out for him in your locker room, another ex-user wrote. Nancy Mace replied, for real. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's not his testosterone level that I should be concerned about after watching that video. Handsome lady in the skincare aisle. And by the way, glad you're in the skincare aisle. The sun can be rather harsh on a face if there isn't skincare product on said face. I mean, you should take up that regimen starting now. Oh, and how about Jughead Mike Collins weighing in? Mike Collins, who, by the way, has had no town hall himself. Reading from the Morgan County Citizen, constituents from Georgia Congressional District 10, which include Morgan County, carried on with a town hall meeting in Athens last week, despite Republican Congressman Mike Collins' absence from the event. Feckless chicken shit. That's, and they know a thing about chicken in that area of Georgia. That's going to do it for today's Ron Show. I want to thank Marianne Duddy Burke from Dignity USA, there's some irony, for joining me to discuss the passing of Pope Francis earlier today. Show re-airs 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a good day.